Chapter 18. Components of an annual report. A company's annual report comprises the following three basic components: balance sheet, profit and loss statement, and cash flow statements. Let us see each of these in detail. Number 1. Balance sheet. In simple word, a balance sheet represents the company's financial position. It represents the total assets owned by the company and also discloses how these assets are financed through debt or equity. The balance sheet of a company is based on a fundamental accounting equation, which is capital is equal to assets minus liability. That is, in other words, owner's funds is equal to possessions minus obligations. Number 1. Assets. Assets are any resource which is owned by the company and is capable of generating future cash flow. For example, cash, plant and machinery, furniture, etc. Assets can be classified depending upon the period of holding as follows. Current assets. Current assets are held for less than 1 year and hence have higher liquidity. For example, cash and cash equivalents, stock, office supplies, short-term deposits. Non-current assets or fixed assets. These assets are held by the company for more than 1 year and cannot be easily converted into cash. For example, land, building, furniture, etc. Number 2. Liabilities. Liabilities are monetary obligations of the entity which are required to be paid off. Some liabilities are generated in the day-to-day course of the business, while some can be loan taken for a longer duration. Depending upon the payment period, liabilities can be classified as current liabilities. These obligations have to be settled within a year. For example, payments to creditors, interest payable, short-term loans, etc. Non-current liabilities. These obligations have to be settled within a year or more. They are important to determine the long-term solvency of the company. Non-current liabilities are normally loans taken by the company for a project or purchase of an asset, etc. The accounting equation goes as capital is equal to assets minus liabilities, or in other words, value to owner is equal to have minus owe. This equation always satisfies. So when we purchase machinery, asset is increased and cash reduces and asset reduces. Thus the asset remains unchanged and hence the equation remains satisfied. This remains true for all transactions. Number 2. Statement of profit and loss. Profit and loss statement reflects the most important perspective of the company, its profitability. It is important to keep track record of all the expenses incurred and all the revenues generated in the year. It reflects the three most important elements: revenue generated during the year, expenses incurred during the year, and net profit of the company. Revenue generated during the year. Every profit and loss statement start with revenue from operations. Revenue is different from profit. Revenue is the number of sales generated during the year. If you sold goods worth rupees 100 and relevant cost are rupees 100, the net amount earned is 100 minus 80 is equal to 20 rupees. In this case, the revenue is 100 and the profit is 20. So we can say that the gross amount received for any transaction relating to the company's core business activity is called revenue from operations. Revenue and sale means the same thing, and it should not be confused with profit. Expenses. Expenses are incurred by the company for generating revenues. These can be for the purchase of raw materials, employee benefits, interest cost, etc. One major expense for the company is depreciation, amortization, and impairment of an asset. Depreciation, amortization, and impairment. When a company buys any fixed assets, its benefit is expected to be enjoyed for more than 1 year. So, it is capitalized in the books. Capitalized means it is not treated as an expense and charged in the P upon L account, but is booked in the balance sheet as asset. And year by year, the value of asset is reduced, and a little part is booked as an expense in the name of depreciation of an asset. For example, if a company has purchased a machine of rupees 10,000 and it is expected to provide benefit for 10 years, every year only rupees 1000 is charged in profit and loss account as depreciation to account for the wear and tear of the machine. Similarly, if an intangible asset, that is trademark, copyright, goodwill, is purchased by the company, it is amortized every year. And in case substantial damage has occurred to the machine during the year, the expense is booked as impairment of asset. Net profit. Net profit is the amount left with the company after all the expenses has been incurred. Net profit belongs to the shareholder of the company. Number 3. Cash flow statements. Cash flow statements are another important part of financial statement that reflects liquidity. The liquidity of the company is how easily the company can convert its asset into cash to meet its short-term or current liabilities. So even though a company owns many assets, a company can face liquidity issue if such assets cannot readily be converted into cash. Cash flow statement tracks the flow of cash, inflow as well as outflow, from various sources throughout the year. A cash flow statement shows cash at the beginning of the year and additions and reductions of cash during the year and the final balance at the end of the year. All these three parts of financial statements, profit and loss statement, cash flow statement and balance sheet, are important for analyzing the true position of the company. There may be a possibility that the company has a very attractive profit and loss statement during the year, but while going through the balance sheet, we find that the company is generating profits by selling off its fixed assets. At other time, the profit and loss statement can also show loss during the year, but while going through the balance sheet, we realize that company has created value for the shareholders by starting new businesses. At times, it is also possible that balance sheet and profit and loss statement represent huge turnover and high profits. But by looking into the cash flow statement, we realize that company is not able to recover money from its customers and thus is unable to pay back its loan on time. Thus, we use various ratios which takes element from all three parts of the financial statement and express a relationship between them. This brings in a lot of clarity in understanding the real standing of a company. In this chapter, we will study various types of ratio along with other computation and interpretations. Going by the convention, we generally compare ratios of various companies of the same industry or ratio of the current financial findings of the company with its record to interpret the performance of the company. Here, I would like to bring your attention to the fact that the right interpretation of ratios is by far more important than being able to compute them. Of course, when computing them correctly, you will never be able to deduce the right findings. Nevertheless, the focus must be more on learning to interpret them correctly, which has been made easy in the following chapters. As it is, the ratios often differ from analyst to analyst. So we will study some very widely used ratios to make things easy. Depending upon the aspects measured by them, these ratios can be categorized as solvency ratio, valuation ratio, activity ratio, liquid ratio, and profitability ratio. Each ratio has a thumb rule which will give you clarity on how to use that particular ratio in understanding the performance of a company. Activity ratio or efficiency ratio. As the name suggests, the activity ratio deal with the day-to-day task of a business. These ratios indicate the operating efficiency of the business. For any company, the routine tasks are the following: procuring raw material from suppliers, converting the raw materials into inventory, selling off inventory, and finally recovering money from its debtors. So, at every step, there is a ratio to measure efficiency. Step 1. For activity, procurement of raw material, the activity ratio is creditor or payable turnover ratio divided by payable or creditor days. Step 2. For activity, conversion of raw material into inventory using assets. The activity ratio will be fixed asset turnover divided by total assets turnover. Step 3. For activity, managing the inventory so produced, the activity ratio will be inventory turnover ratio divided by inventory days. Step number 4. For the activity, sale of inventory and management of debtors, the activity ratio will be debtor or receivable turnover divided by debtor or receivable days. Now let us learn about each of the aforementioned ratios. Number 1. Creditor or payable turnover ratio. Creditor are those people to whom the company is required to pay in the near future. In other words, they are a liability for the company. The creditor turnover ratio measures the number of times a company pays off its creditors. So the creditor turnover ratio is equal to net credit purchase divided by average trade payables. Second, creditor or payable days. This ratio tells us the number of days in which a company repays its creditors. Creditor days is equal to 365 days divided by creditor turnover ratio. Interpretation. Think what is beneficial for the company. Often, it is good for the company if its creditors allow it to have a long credit period. Moreover, the company can avail the benefit of each payment discount by paying early. Consequently, a high payable ratio when the company is paying up creditor faster than the industry average relative to the industry reflects the company is not able to utilize its credit facility properly. Had the management been able to negotiate well with suppliers, it would have been able to bargain a reasonable credit period for itself. A meager payable ratio, on the other hand, reflects that the company is not able to pay its creditors on time, or the company is requiring a higher number of days to pay back its creditor than the industry average. Thumb rule. Normally, the lower the creditor turnover ratio, the better is it for the company. That is, the company is paying the creditors for a lesser number of times in a year. And the higher the creditor days, the better it is for the company, since the creditors are allowing better credit period. Number 3. Fixed asset turnover ratio. Fixed asset turnover ratio represents how efficiently the management utilizes its fixed asset to generate sales. The higher the ratio, the higher is the sales generated by the company by using its fixed assets. Fixed asset turnover ratio is equal to net sales divided by total fixed assets. Interpretation. First of all, the investors have to understand that fixed assets once purchased offer benefit for a longer time. In the very year when the fixed assets are bought, the fixed asset turnover ratio may fall abruptly, but it has got nothing to do with the efficiency of use of the asset. So for the year of purchase of fixed assets, you are bound to get a lower ratio, but that is only because the denominator's value has increased. For capital intensive industries such as automobile industries and iron and steel companies, this ratio is very low by default, as the fixed asset value of machinery is very high. But generally speaking, the lower value of this ratio reflects the inefficiency in the use of fixed asset for generating sales. Thumb rule. The higher the fixed asset turnover ratio, the better is the asset management of the company. Number 4. Inventory turnover ratio. Inventory turnover ratio shows the number of times a company has sold and replaced its inventory in a year. It is calculated as follows. Inventory turnover ratio is equal to cost of goods sold divided by closing inventory. Here the cost of goods sold is the cost incurred in manufacturing the sold goods, thus not including the cost incurred for closing inventory, which is the unsold goods that have been already manufactured. Interpretation. A low inventory turnover ratio implies lower sales value and higher inventory. Consequently, we can conclude that either the company is not marketing its product efficiently or there is excessive inventory remaining at the end of the year. In the latter case, the company is also incurring a high cost to maintain the inventory. While on the other hand, a high turnover ratio may represent that company is selling goods very quickly, but can also mean that the company is not able to maintain the required stocks according to its sale. Inefficiency in production. Thumb rule. We usually consider that the higher the inventory turnover ratio, the better it is. Number 5. Inventory days. Days in inventory helps to calculate the number of days taken by the company to sell its inventory. It is calculated as inventory days is equal to 365 days divided by inventory turnover ratio. In other words, this ratio shows the number of days required by the company to convert its inventory into cash. For example, if the inventory days is 7 days, it means that the company needs only 7 days to convert its inventory into cash, signifying high liquidity. While if inventory days is 365 days, usually for real estate based companies, it means that inventory of the company takes around 1 year to be sold. Thumb rule. The lower the number of days taken for the company to sell its inventory, the better is its efficiency. Number 6. Debtors turnover ratio. Debtors are the one who owe money to the company. That is, they are an asset for the company. It is also important to collect cash from debtors on a timely basis. Otherwise, the company loses out in earning interest. Debtor turnover ratio is equal to net credit sales divided by average outstanding debtors. The debtor turnover ratio represents the effectiveness of the collection of debt from the debtors. Say, if the credit sale of the company is rupees 1 lakh and the average outstanding debtor is rupees 5,000, then the debtor turnover ratio is equal to 1 lakh divided by 5,000 is equal to 20 times. So, this means that the company is able to collect from its debtor about 20 times in a year. Thumb rule. The company should be able to recover money frequently from its debtor. So the higher the ratio, the better it is. Number 7. Debtors collection period. It tells us the number of days required by the company to collect money from its debtors. We can calculate the average number of debtor collection days by average collection period is equal to 365 days divided by debtors turnover ratio. So, when debtor turnover ratio is 20 times, then the average collection period is equal to 365 divided by 20 is equal to 18.25 days. This means that a company recover its money from its debtor within 18.25 days. The credit policy of the company states the number of days it allows its debtor to pay back the money. A very strict debtor policy would mean that the company collect its debt timely without any loss of interest cost. But this can also lead to potential loss of customers who are unable to pay back within the given credit period. Now, if the credit policy of the company is to collect money from debtor is 15 days, while on an average the company collects within 18.25 days. This shows that the company is not able to collect money from debtor within the time, which reflects the inefficiency of the collection process of the company. Thumb rule. The lower the number of days taken to recover money from debtors, the better it is. Going by the general convention, as investor, we prefer buying a stock when it is around its 52-week low or when it has a low PE ratio. If investing was that simple, everyone would have become a billionaire by now. The truth is that a share is only worth the number of future earnings expected from it. The low PE or low price of the share does not matter at all if you don't expect the future of the stock to be bright. Now the question arises, how to evaluate a stock for its true worth? Well, there is no fixed method of valuation of stocks. The rule of valuation of stocks are pretty simple and logical. Your checklist before buying a mobile phone is entirely different from your checklist before buying a vegetable. Similarly, the valuation technique depends on the type of company and its business. Therefore, it is imperative to understand the business model of the chosen companies first. Often investors skip the part of analyzing a business and directly jump onto stock valuation, which is insane.